I pick on her. So, most of you were here before, but for the, I am Robin. My background, biomed since the mid 90s. Took 5 years off to be an IT person for a while. Associate's degree in biomed, master's degree in network security, and yeah, I put my certifications up. I keep them below. The only one that I keep current is the CBED because the only one that counts. So, if you want to email me, take a picture of that, email me. I'll make fun of all your emails just as much as I do everyone else's. Networking. Most of us deal with networking constantly, but we don't know truly the fundamentals of it. Most network communication is broken down into models. This model is the one most useful. We won't get above much. We'll get touch slightly a little bit, but level 3 is about what we're going to get. This is your physical part of your network. This is the wiring, the hardware switches, the putting in the IP address. This is what almost all Biomeds have dealt with to some extent. This is where security starts coming in. Knowing what you're connecting to, knowing what you're talking with, setting up paths and such. I expected the class to be flipped the other way around. We would touch this, started playing on some of that a little more. So rearranged my classes slightly. There is another model where that's together, that's together, that's together, but it's all theoretical in how to do it. Not much to talk about that. And it's literally what size wire is the wiring, how many turns in, what makes the Cat 5 compared to a Cat 6 or a Cat 5A compared to a Cat 6. It's all dealt with up here. Physical parts, the twisted pair, we all deal with the twisted pair. Fiber. I never thought I'd deal with fiber. I now have fiber in my house. Coaxial, if you use the cable network. First network I ever put into my house was a coax cable running switch to switch to switch to a DSL line. Wireless, how much stuff is going wireless? Physical has lots. The definition of what wireless is. Everyone hears it as a 802.11.a.b.ac. whatever. In this layer, that physical, how much of a frequency change is different between a 0 and a 1 is all defined in that. Cellular, believe it or not, is also in that. B is now a digital cellular. It got tied in. Frequencies. Everybody here's, so we're going to a 5G network. That's 5 gigahertz. That's a frequency of the network, not speed. This is where IT loves mixing up metaphors. I'll play with that. I love picking on that. Physical structures. Most popular. About 7 actually. Mesh, each computer connects directly to every other computer. Lots of wiring. Very low control because it's computer to computer. It goes out that point, but the other computer, you physically have to get into it. Token rings. Fiber is running in a token ring fashion, or used to be. Where literally, and it's a dual, this one is a dual token ring. One going one way, one going the other. This one would have a token. It would send to this one and receive. When it was done talking, it would pass it over to this one. Star network, Ethernet is mostly a star network. This is what everything's gone to, where all the computers tie into a central hub and connect back out. Then you talk about the logical systems of the whole thing. I always said logical structures and virtual structures are how to lie to the hardware. And I've won every argument I've had with that with an IT person. Ethernet. They love their acronyms. Ethernet, carrier sensor, multi-access, collision detection. A fancy word for saying it checks to see if there's a carrier signal on there to make sure no one's there, and then sends and sees if it sent at the same time something else did. This is where I like picking on IT. CD, collision detect, carrier detect, compact disk. It's almost worse than the military, isn't it? Token rings, being it's a shared physical media. Carrier sensor, multi-access. Multi-access, why it's shared media with collision avoidance. Hence a token. By handing a token around, the one with the token is allowed to talk. Everyone else isn't allowed to say anything. Collision avoidance. Use of the token signal that is handed from one device to the next. That is generally a single wire, double token ring, same thing twice, receive and send at the same time. Mesh network, as I showed you with the physical one. You can physically have a mesh network and logically have any of these. Ethernet is a physical star network and logically a mesh network. Devices. Hubs and switches look exactly the same. Looking at it, you won't know the difference. Physically, how it works is very different. A hub, the signal comes in and goes out to all ports at the same time. There is no security, no separation, no nothing. It comes in, it goes out. The receiving device gets to decide whether it wants it or not. You can still buy hubs, but if someone does, shoot them. Switches are not any more expensive than hubs, and there is no reason to have them. A switch, it comes in one port and only goes out the ports it should. It keeps a table of what devices connected on what port or what groups should go out that one port. A hub allows lots of collision detection mentioned before. By a switch, you isolate things out so you don't have collisions because it's only going out where it's supposed to go out. Switches come in two variations, manned and unmanaged and unmanaged. Unmanaged basically just verifies the signal's coming in, it needs to go out to that device based on MAC address. MAC address is a hardware address put into network devices by the manufacturer. The first part of the MAC address is a manufacturer's code. That code means it's that manufacturer. The second one is supposed to identify the device. Theoretically, you're not supposed to be able to have two MAC addresses be the same. The first half of it identifies the manufacturer. Half of it, the first half. The second half is like serial number. Theoretically, there should be no duplication. That's out the window. They make more devices than could be accounted for in a single MAC address, even if the first half didn't identify the manufacturer. Router. A router is a separation point for internal to external networks. Internal will go through switches, such bounce computer to computer. The moment it realizes that the computer wants to talk to is not internal, it deals with the IP address and goes through the router going outside. This is where IP addresses really come in. Technically, when a network is broken into VLans, you have a router to split to run things through VLans, from one VLAN to another. Do note, MAC addresses can be spoofed. Bridge. Bridge is a translation point from one network to another. Physical differences, logical differences, or just transferring from one to another. Moving from one VLAN to another takes a bridge. At that point, the bridge is simple, it's in the switch. A router is technically a bridge from an internal network to an external network. We were talking about Cerner before. Cerner has a connectivity engine which connects to the device via a RS-232 port, translated to a USB into the connectivity engine out through the network. That is connecting two distinctly physically different communication styles. It's a bridge. Proxy servers. If they have been done in the order I want, I would point out that that would be what was used in security. You'd run to a proxy server either to hide yourself or to hide yourself from the outside or protect yourself from outside people trying to look back at you, make it anonymous. These are quite often used in network attacks now. As I pointed out in the last class, the QR codes, you don't know if it's pointing to a proxy server or pointing directly to where you want to go. Intrusion detections, intrusion preventions are, again, network devices, generally either just inside or just outside the router. Intrusion detection is inward looking to see if someone has got in, is not acting the way they should be on the inside. Intrusion prevention is to keep people out that shouldn't, like a firewall, but a lot more advanced. These are all generally hardware, and well, down here, hardware, first two layers. This is where they started looking at what the data is going across. IP addresses are in binary. I do the translation to binary. Normal IPv4 is in normal decimal. It'll come back later. I'll be back for later. Anyway, translation to 3. I give this to you in that fashion because we will be talking about mask addresses, IP masks, and this will get important. These are the only numbers acceptable in an IP mask. Something I didn't get to in the previous one, I probably should have. One of the ways to hack in is to break the system in some fashion. Put some other number than that into a mask and see what happens to the system. Sometimes it will open up and let you have access to things that you would be surprised. IPv4. These are things called octets because there are 8 binary bits, 4 octets. This is a home address. It actually was taken off my computer at the time I was writing this up. Business address. IPv6. I heard that long before I decided to get my degrees in IT.
It's being mandated at the VA here shortly.
It should have been mandated.
I know, but it's gonna be changing over to I think 2 years. I just saw an IT memo on it, where they're gonna get rid of that before.
2 years is taking too long, but good. Yes. I actually have my own cloud in my basement. I don't trust Apple or Google to not look over my stuff. My stuff is my stuff. That's private. I didn't give you permission to go look at, send me ads. And I was shocked to find how many people were trying to hack my cloud from all over the world. I'm not joking.
But why not just so they can be?
I actually put up a second one. They left the second one alone.
Really?
Yes, they're hacking the first one. And by hacking, I mean 20 attacks a day for this little thing that has my documents and a whole lot of music.
We should say that I get a 400 file.
I might actually put a file there saying, all this music is free on the internet if you go looking for it. You didn't have to hack me for it. There used to be, you could take whole blocks of IP addresses, and that whole block was a country. And you could just say, no one from outside the United States should see me. So no non-United States IP addresses. This group, blocked. They knew in the 1980s they were running out of IP addresses. It finally happened only about a couple years ago. And you can only get a direct IP address if someone else lets theirs elapse. So IPv6. You know it's much longer. Shortcuts and how they write it. Also note this is in hexadecimal rather than in decimal. Because it's hard to keep track of what addresses you hand out, they came up with DHCP to have a server hand out an IP address within the networks, hospital business networks. From here forward, I generally tend to talk about IPv4 because that's what everyone is still using, amazingly enough. But most of these still translate into IPv6. There is a separation between network and device address. First part of this will be a network address. The last part of it will be a device address. In the, I need to rewrite this. I didn't do a very good job. In the mask, where there would be a 1 in the binary is part of the network address. All the ones at the front, all the zeros at the back. First half being network, the second half being binary. True both for IPv4 and v6. Shortcut on how to write it. But of course you have to enter it separately. Broke it down in classes for size of network. And of course you see I'm using the shortcut on how to write it in. I'm lazy, just like all of IT. I don't know if there's a class D and class E in IPv6. Class A, B, and C, of course, is much harder for IPv6, but that's private addresses, not routable. I'll guarantee all of the hospitals are using these 10 dots. whatever. If you're at home, if you have your own router and switch, you're all in this 192.168. Whatever. Oddly enough, I have not seen a home router DHCP allow IPv6, despite they knew 40 years ago they would have to go to it. Subnets and supernets is where these VLans come in. The idea is to group computers. All of accounting has their own network, and hence you can give rules based on that and sort of keep them separate. You increase the network for a subnet, decrease the network address, decrease the device number of devices. In the older networks, you then have truly physically separated. You avoided collisions. With Ethernet, that became less of a problem. SuperNet, you went the other way. And back in the 90s, the subnets, the government had an address like 2.xxx. Everything under that was their proper network address, and they would address bounce all over the place. Any subnetting within that could go directly computer to computer and talk fine, as long as they were just doing subnets. If they were trying to do supernets, where they were trying to use part of the first octet for devices, they could not then talk outside that VLAN. Robbing part of the network address, and cannot get to out to the internet or past the router without being translated to what they call NAT. NAT stands for Network Address Translation, which is mentioned in the next, later on. VLANs and subnetting, separating things out, virtually separate things out. You need bridges to cross the VLANs. In a managed switch, you combine VLANs together to go down one wire to go to the next switch, and then break back out. So, an example of code VLANs. And these were actually VLANs used at a couple of hospitals I've looked at. I've seen they tend to have that well separated. Surgery would have VLAN, imaging would have it, patient monitoring would have it, all like that. 2019, they ran out of V4 IP addresses. Truly ran out. We've been out of IP addresses for 2 years. The government's the only ones I know of being deciding they're going to go to V6, despite the fact we don't have any. So yeah, literally, you can't get an IP address unless someone.
I just saw this about a month ago, so they just made a decision.
Oh yes. Yeah. My shock is not that the government's being that slow; it's that no one else was any faster. You'd think 40 years they'd have plenty of time. What, businesses work on a 5-year plan?
Yeah, I've been hearing the same thing too for years. Oh, we're going to run out of IP addresses. We need to change our ID. Nobody's done it.
The only reason nobody's done it is because of the cheats they've done along the way. But it has made address blocking now very cumbersome for security. So it's gotten almost impossible to have a private group of IP addresses. You get a single one if you can get it at all. I actually need to check. I haven't looked at my router itself to whether I have 1984 or 1AP6 on the Google router itself. But I know internally from my Google router it's IPv4. Might as well get everybody used to the V6. You don't use them anyway?
99%
So it's a bigger table, it's still a spreadsheet.
I can't just pull it out of the top of my head like I do the services.
My head's too full, I'm sorry.
Server I'm working on, I got that one memorized right now.
You don't have the server given a name? That one's Bill Clinton, that one's Hillary Clinton, that one's Donald Trump, that one's Trump Jr.
We're gonna name this one.
Because you want to blow it up.
Put down some server.
Hit it with a taser.
Kind of hard to switch.
Oh, okay. What's it doing down? It has to be physically down.
Rebuild it from scratch because now the vendor doesn't have it. Image. On server 2008, it's wonderful.
I'm stopping asking right there. Okay. Another point where IT loves using the same name for two different things. Ports. You have the physical port, that's the connection spot in the wall or on the switch or on the router or whatever. And you have logical ports in software. 64K with the ports logically. And yes, that is 2 to the 64,000. No, I can't do right. That is a power. 2 to a power with that. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, logical ports are written with a colon at the end of it. That gets important for certain applications that I know Biomeds use occasionally. If you're doing a PAX image, that might be one port. If you're doing a DICOM image, that'll be a different port because it's talking to a specific application, software application. A bunch of them are initially reserved. HTTP, port 80. That's where it first creates its communication and then transfers on to another one. So your first communication with that. I spent a fair amount of time once troubleshooting a problem where one device was defaulting to the wrong port. You ought to read network traffic for weeks straight and see how your eyes do work. Most tiring week I ever had. I never got up from my desk. Wireless. Everybody wants to go wireless.
No.
Good, don't. I always wanted to walk into a place that was heavily wireless with a signal generator, square wave signal generator, a spark plug, and about a foot-long length of wire. Broadband transmission. I would wipe out every wireless device in there. I have a ham radio license. Most of us have connected to the wireless. We get an SSID. I'll probably I'll switch this around. Simply the name of the quote network you're attached to, just like a VLAN. I want to talk to the guest or the monitoring or the whatever you want to call it, they all talk to the same access point. They all use the same frequencies. So they get a key so that when you connect in, it's encrypted right. That way someone can't try and steal communication. Those are broadcasts. That's true. Your wireless devices reconnect to access points so often that that key is so commonly transmitted that yes, wireless security is nothing to talk about. All the frequencies are known. I could sit here with a home-built receiver and pick them all up, run them into a computer, and start separating things out, translating things, trying to catch keys. Way too easily done. Oh, once I get a key, then I go for passwords and user IDs. Who should I get first? I'm quite sure that the CEO's computers are not wired into the wall. I guarantee they're wireless, so he can move them around all he wants. Better still, I bet his keyboard's wireless. I'll catch his Bluetooth. Bluetooth was thought not to need encryption because its range was still so short until someone from MIT built what they called a Bluetooth sniper, parabolic receiving antenna that he could use to pick up Bluetooth signals as far as a mile away.
I love Bluetooth.
And there is one version of Bluetooth that is meant to have a 1 mile receiving distance. I know that only because I ride a motorcycle away. Bluetooth communications. Line of sight up to 1 mile. Other technology that they will talk about. Quality of service. Lacking. Heavily lacking. I've had many arguments about IT on that. Everybody wants the quality of service. And any non-biomed will argue that they want the quality of service for those Wi-Fi phones to be the top because they don't want to hear them constantly dropping out. They want the sound to sound good. I constantly argue that what should be quality of service is patient one. Yeah, should be top, period. No matter what. The phones can be second if they have to be.
Yes, networks if you're in class, not drop out every 15 minutes.
This is true, but I would also argue the guest network should be a completely different wireless access point, which they hate me saying.
Yeah.
You know, make the guest network physically separated and leave them on 2.4 gigahertz rather than 5 gigahertz.
Yeah, I have to be able to achieve
Yeah.
Instead of having a guest network, I feel managed building. So it'd be great.
Almost every place I've been in, it's the same exact same access point.
We have our own access points for laptops, wireless for guest network, wireless for other stuff. But we're going to fix that. So it's like that's a step backwards.
Quality of service doesn't mean how good it is. It means who gets priority. You can still have the phones drop out if you have too many hop in. Your problem with the your problem with the laptops dropping out on the guest network is probably the fact that too many of them are trying to access the same access point. Most
problem they rent from two Trimedics, and Trimedics laptops are on a 15-minute license. So every 15 minutes we get dropped out. And the St. Luke's won't let the Trimedics people on the St. Luke's network. So it's real fun when you're in a virtual class and you're in a 2-hour class, CBAC class, by the way. And you're being dropped out every 15 freaking seconds. Oh, it's a blast. That's why you have your phone on, And you can hear the virtual, you can hear the audio when your computer is saying, meeting disconnected.
Or you
Wait.
hotspot your laptop off the phone.
Yeah, but then you better have infinite data on your phone. Granted, that's fairly cheap nowadays.
It's a lot of fun.
Yes.
15-minute licenses for contractors that
No.
are on the guest hotel.
Note the dangerous thing is I think there should be cell phone signal killers in all of ORs.
Stop.
Yeah, well, I'll save my surgeons for another time. Quick note.
I've gotten a call from a nurse in the OR saying, hey, you know what you're looking for.
Disclaimer note, I do have a younger sister that is a doctor. DO. My father was a PhD, of course, so they talk back and forth. Is it a PhD or a mere MD? Polling is, they don't talk about that so much, but it is generally done on a switch going through and saying, are you talking to me? Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me? Just down and forth. Boom, 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 boom. That technology is sort of still used, sorry, not sort of, it is still used in a lot of telemetry. It is not used in general IT anymore. Bandwidth. There's a nice distortion of a technical term. Anybody remember from electronics what bandwidth means? How much frequency is needed to get your information across? No. Now they talk about bandwidth as literally how much data goes through. The more data, the greater the bandwidth. Not necessarily. IT. Yes, I love people in IT. They're just tag you're shared bandwidth. One of many things using the exact same signal. Wi-Fi, wireless is all the shared bandwidth. Hard plugged in is you are a direct single use bandwidth all the way to the switch. Then you start sharing up. Store and forward is how all the network works. Information goes from point A to the first device and stores. That device then forwards it as soon as it can. One of the fun hacks is catching the in-between point and copying the memory out. Generally, it's needing to be physically there to do it. Some devices you do that with, some you can't. I don't know of any way to copy out the memory of a managed switch other than its tables, but it's sending and receiving data. I don't know if anyone copied it. That doesn't mean there isn't one. I just don't know. VPN, virtual private network. You're still going over the public network. You're still tied to the problem that if someone mass hits the device with signals, you're going to have trouble getting through. But as for any kind of appearance that there are other devices on the network, this makes it look like you have a private connection between you and whoever you're talking to in the other end. A lot of that is done between buildings. I'm quite sure China Mission has a VPN connection all the way down to Florida for all its traffic, but it's going through standard internet. Link guarantees that both sides see the carrier signal. Doesn't guarantee data is going on, just means both sides see it. One of the common questions you get when you talk to a vendor, do you have a link light? Do you have green light that says it sees its carrier? activity. It's that amber light that likes to flash. Do note it should not be flashing in a nice rhythmic fashion. It should be rather erratic. Handshake. When I first start the communication between my computer and anything else, even my computer to its Wi-Fi access point, it does a handshake, talks back and forth saying, hi, this is me, this is how I talk, responds back, yeah, I can understand that, no problem. Any communication has that back and forth handshake, all the way down to the packet. All communication between network devices are broken up into small packages. IP, Internet Protocol, a set of protocols used to make sure that all devices can talk. There used to be a bunch of those. Microsoft had their own, Apple had its own called Apple Talk. They've all dropped out, stuck with IP. TCP/IP, backend just the same as part of the IP protocol. Transfer control protocol, assembling, disassembling of packages and making sure they get to the other side, received properly, and reassembled in proper order. Most data gets transferred this way. UDP, user datagram protocol. Your phones, videos are done UDP. Create the information, I send it, it's a constant stream. If the package gets dropped off, so what? Pick up the next package, do it again. Most of the time, the user can't see it. When you start losing a bunch of them, you start losing intelligence on the other end. The voice starts getting garbled, your picture scrambles, whatever. All those cell phones are done UDP, and they want that as a high priority. Actually, I ran a bit fast this time. I tried to keep it at 20 screens, thinking that would take me roughly close to my hour. So, my usual questions, the ultimate answer is 42. The question is, what's 6 times 9? There's still something fundamentally wrong with the universe. There are actually more hidden jokes in there. If you really want to ask about those, do it later.